The term twin flames has grown to become a very popular label or term used by those who claim to be in a spiritual path or have experienced a very intense relationship that they just can't seem to shake or get rid of. While there is evidence of twin flame-like connections in multiple religions that go back hundreds, if not thousands of years, the term twin flame has evolved into something a bit darker, trapping those who feel lost into cult-like groups who exploit them for attention and money using techniques that stem from toxic patriarchal ideas in organized religion. In this video, we're not only going to explore the history of twin flames, but how the rise of social media and a lack of a level of emotional intelligence can lead people down a dark path of exploitation or the alt-right pipeline. And if you don't know me, my name is Alex. This is me doing things. Okay. So what are twin flames? The idea is that twin flames are two halves of one soul. Okay. And they're separated in the 3D and they're supposed to come together throughout lifetimes to mirror back shadows and facilitate healing. In my opinion, I think the real question is there really a spiritual significance to being a twin flame, or is it just a term made by human beings who have been extremely heartbroken? There are multiple definitions of twin flames depending on who you ask, and there does seem to be evidence of this kind of relationship going back centuries. But for the most part, the mainstream definition of twin flames is very much about a romantic connection. And so there are examples in ancient religions that could be evidence of twin flames. I'm going to go over a very, very brief summary of some religions, and these are not all of the examples that I could have used. These are not every single example ever. This is very, very condensed information. We could literally talk about this stuff all day. In Hinduism, many use the example of Shiva and Shakti, and I'm sorry if my accent is like horrible. Or in short, masculine and feminine. Shiva is known as the action behind Shakti being able to create. So again, this is a very condensed definition. We could talk about Shiva and Shakti like all day long. So Hinduism is absolutely fascinating, by the way. It was one of my favorite classes that I ever took in high school. So thank you for that. In Christianity, some people would say that Adam and Eve were twin flames. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's because they were looked at as like the original couple or counterparts. In Islam doesn't really promote any sort of twin flame relationship or like anything witchy in general. But the story of Adam and Eve is interesting because in the Quran, it tells a story of them being sent to earth with the support of God and God's plan. And I think that if you asked a New Age spiritualist, like how they would describe that, I think they would either describe that as like divine timing or having a soul contract. Some people want to argue that there's twin flames in Buddhism. I'm like, I don't really know about that one, but that's just my opinion. In Buddhism, it's more about transcending the ego and finding balance. It's not necessarily about getting into a romantic relationship that will help you achieve that. In Greek mythology, and now I think that this is where a lot of New Age spiritualists draw the like two halves of one soul thing from. So Plato talks about in Greek mythology, humans were originally created with 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 faces, 2 heads, etc. And then they like Zeus split them in half because he was jealous of like the power that they held. And then like the 2 halves then spend like the rest of their lives looking for each other. Very, very dramatic. And I would definitely say that relates a lot to the more mainstream definition of twin flames. In ancient China, obviously, we have yin and yang, which is similar to masculine and feminine. And now in African spirituality, there's a ton of emphasis on ancestral work and ancestral approval. So there are so many rituals that are for like self-love and like getting to know who you are. And that's beneficial for when you're getting into a relationship, because then you don't really get lost in your person, right? You're still your own individual self. But I really want to like emphasize that like in African spirituality, it's a lot about getting the ancestors' approval. It's almost like a deep initiation process to be able to enter into a connection that's so spiritually significant. And in Native American cultures, I wouldn't say that this is about meeting your person, but I think that is important to note. There is a gender called Two-Spirit, or a gender identification called Two-Spirit, where the person embodies both the male and the female. And these people are very highly respected and they're looked at as healers. So even after just a little bit of research, and even if you just know like this much about other religions, I think it's very easy to come to the conclusion that like the mainstream definition of twin flames that we see on like TikTok is incredibly whitewashed. So now that we've briefly gone over some religions that have been around since the dawn of time, I think it's appropriate now to talk about the religious movement, New Age spirituality. So New Age beliefs started to pop up around the 1950s, but they exploded in popularity in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. These beliefs focus more on self-improvement using ideologies and concepts from ancient religions, but it isn't technically considered a religion. New Age beliefs draw from these ancient religions, and from what I have seen, in particular Buddhism and Hinduism. And then they combine them with occult practices and astrology, which both of those things have also been around for centuries all around the world. New Agers also believe that everything and anything is connected to one energetic source, and that this source is within us and it's accessible when we need it. This concept is similar to God, but there is no gender and it isn't necessarily personified. It's important to note that astrology is used as like a blueprint as well, or like a guide or a map to like your soul's purpose, your soul's journey. Then it's supposed to help assist you with your time here on Earth. We can look back a few decades, particularly in the 60s and 70s, and see that these kinds of ideas spread with the rise of the hippie movement. But our parents didn't have what we call social media back then. They had to rely on word of mouth and community and face-to-face socializing. Socializing. Oh my God. Today we have TikTok where someone can make a 30-second video of casting a spell on their ex and it can go viral in just moments, right? And then it can start like a full-blown movement. This makes misinformation and propaganda a lot easier to spread nowadays. And being on these social platforms requires a different level of discernment that our parents didn't necessarily have to have. Combine this with the loneliness epidemic amongst Gen Zers, and suddenly we're surrounded by a bunch of people who are willing to spend what little spending money they have on shortcuts and quick fixes to avoid emotional pain. And to be honest, I don't blame them, especially with everyone's attention spans going to shit. Gen Z and millennials are very infamous for being overworked and underpaid, with little resources left over at the end of the month to receive proper health care for their physical and mental health needs. Here in the States, it's arguably much cheaper to spend $10 on an Etsy witch to cast a spell for you than it would be to go to therapy, especially if you don't have health insurance, which could cost you hundreds if you don't have health insurance, right? The rise in loneliness amongst young people is a whole video in and of itself, and there's so many think pieces on that. But because of this, we've also seen the rise in non-committal or more nonchalant relationships, which come with all the emotion and action of a committed relationship, but are void of like a level of emotional intelligence and like proper titles like boyfriend and girlfriend. Situationships, flirtationships, or friends with benefits seem to become more appealing with younger people because they are afraid of being hurt or rejected. But they stay in these connections because, in my opinion, I think they're afraid of facing our government's unjust practices and policies alone. And I know that that's like a really bold and crazy statement. It's kind of like, what are you talking about? But if you don't agree, let me ask you this. If you had free healthcare, free education, affordable housing, a fully stocked fridge, you had a 401k, you had a savings account, you had the safety to be yourself in public, you were making a living wage, and you lived in a walkable neighborhood, would you be participating in a relationship that seems to always end in pain and agony? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. Or you would be a lot less likely to, right? Situationships usually consist of two people who are equally emotionally unavailable, but display it in different fonts. One person is usually more avoidant while the other is more anxious, which creates a push and pull dynamic that can last forever. Both people are waiting for the other to change and often engage in manipulative tactics to facilitate that change, whether it be gaslighting or people pleasing. Either way, they're never on the same page, and they stay in this dynamic for months, sometimes years, because they feel like in the moment it can't get any better than that. Arguably, this makes sense, especially for Gen Zers and millennials, because they feel as though they don't have much to look forward to in their daily lives. It's easy to get caught up in that kind of stuff when you just feel like it's never going to get any better than this. And yeah, there are multiple personal reasons people stay in these types of connections, usually stemming from some sort of unprocessed childhood trauma. And it's very well known that hurt people often subconsciously turn to destructive relationships to play out those themes, including their relationship with their church or religion. And as a tarot reader, I have done hundreds, if not thousands, of readings on situationships, and they all have similar themes. One being the back and forth dynamic. You break up, you get back together, repeat. And there's always one person in that dynamic that comes back. Like there's always one person in the dynamic that leaves. It's never like both of them. It's always one of them that leaves but they always come back within like a specific time frame. So like say every 2.5 months, which leads me to number 2, which is bad behavior or pattern repetition. And then we have number 3, manipulation. That's the gaslighting and the people pleasing. And number 4, which is the biggest one, the feeling of being stuck to their partner as if they can't shake them or let them go. The attraction or the pull is so strong and overpowering. It almost feels like they're embedded into their DNA. It like it's divine or meant to be. And I don't think that they're crazy for feeling that way. I get very similar questions from these clients as well. What is the purpose of this connection? Why can't I let them go? How do I let go of this person? What am I not seeing? What am I supposed to learn? And last, are they my twin flame? And these clients aren't necessarily one type of person either. They all come from different religious backgrounds, genders, ages, ethnicities, etc. So why are so many different kinds of people having similar experiences? Is it really divine? Is it really an act of God? Or is there something else more rooted in human behavior going on here? It seems as though with the more therapy that I've done, the modern idea of twin flames has morphed from something seemingly rare and beautiful into something more sinister and calculated. The more clients I read for in these situations, the more I have found their connections to be rooted in what we would think are outdated patriarchal or conservative beliefs. But here we are in 2025, upholding those beliefs for the sake of spiritual growth. I just don't think a lot of people realize it. A situationship or a back and forth relationship can be mistaken for the push and pull or runner chaser dynamic in the twin flame relationship. But when you dive deeper into the psychology, it seems as though a lot of us are not experiencing something divine, but instead a trauma bond, right? Theoretically, twin flames are supposed to reflect back to each other what they should heal. And it is often a shared experience amongst the women in the twin flame community that the masculine or the man is the one who runs the most. So is it really masculine energy, or is it human men that are finally being held accountable for centuries of mistreatment? And now we're realizing, hey, you can't just dip out whenever you want. It's the end of my time in the twin flame community. It made me wonder, are we as women supposed to be responsible for teaching that lesson? It took me a while, but it became very clear to me that New Age spirituality was the same as like any other religion. Most of the religion is filled with people who want to better themselves and get closer to God, etc., while also improving their mental health and expanding their community. But there is a select group of people who take it too far, and then they put their religion at risk of seeming like a cult, just like any other religion. Feminism is a huge theme for New Agers, as it is made up of mostly women from what I saw. Okay. And at first it feels good to join a group of people who are like down for women's rights and like want to fight the patriarchy. But that feeling can be lost pretty quickly when you meet another New Ager who is participating in an abusive relationship for the sake of spiritual growth. And it's even worse when you realize that their mentor may be the one encouraging them to do so. We know that feminism is not just for women. Men benefit from it too. Patriarchy has created restraints for everybody involved. Patriarchy requires women to fight for equality in a society where men are favored. And then at the same time, men are expected to have like 3 out of 7 personality traits. They have like 7 to choose from. And you get 3 of them, right? Like one being like tough, monster trucks, horny, I don't know, suck it up and be a man. Okay, women have their expectations too, but you guys get what I'm saying. When you see a New Ager who is a woman doing a back and forth dynamic with someone, it's easy to see the relationship for what it is on the outside. This person is dating someone who has commitment issues. If you guys aren't on the same page, leave. But if your community is telling you that there's a more spiritual element to the pain that you're experiencing, what are you going to do, right? What if there are certain lessons to be learned? What if there's a past life connection that needs to be sorted out in this life? What if you have to do this back and forth in order to ascend? There is a certain language that goes along with twin flame connections in this community, most notable being masculine and feminine, ascension, shadow work, the runner chaser, and then the one that triggers me the most, reconciliation. This language can make your connection seem more significant or important than what the average Christian fundamentalist may be experiencing in their relationship. But there really isn't much of a difference when abuse is present. The only thing that's different is the language being used and where you spend your Sundays. The Christian fundamentalist is being encouraged to stay in her marriage because it is a sin to go against her husband and she must stand by him in order to get in heaven. The New Ager has to stay in her connection because it's to help heal the divine masculine and ascend to the highest level of consciousness. Are these two situations really so different? Yeah, I don't think so. Either way, both women are being abused and both are struggling to get out. Patriarchy is present, or hierarchy in general is present in both of these scenarios as well. New Agers generally believe that feminine energy is relaxed and calm and nurturing and creative, while the Christians believe that women are meant to stay at home and take care of the children. Masculine energy is about protection and taking action, while Christians believe men are the ones going to work and bringing home the bacon. It's not that I don't believe in the masculine and feminine energy ideas. It's about how they are being used in our everyday language and how they're being manipulated. Social media has pushed many trends regarding getting into your masculine energy or like getting into your feminine energy. They've made these things very popular. And a lot of this content really is just enforcing traditional gender roles. Many of these women who participate in feminine energy content require the men in their lives to be the ones who pay for everything and ask you out first and take charge of everything while the women receive princess treatment, right? Which is obviously very similar to the Christian fundamentalist expectations for women to stay at home while the men go to work. And I don't think it's wrong to be in a relationship dynamic like that, but it is important to draw these kinds of comparisons. For centuries, men have been expected to do the pursuing, but now that the dynamics are shifting, I think a lot of us are very confused as to where to go from here. Women are no longer required to rely on men for food or shelter or support anymore. We can go to work, we can own property, we can drive cars. Many women in today's society are intimidated by the success that women have worked so hard for too. And many of them are falling behind or refusing to adapt. Unfortunately, a lot of women are settling for these men who are refusing to adapt, or they're getting into more monetarily transactional relationships. These couples in particular are reverting back to more conservative values, right? But it has a different name or a different face this time. And I do think that it is New Age spirituality. And of course, we have the male podcast warriors who literally just invite women onto their shows to like verbally abuse them, knowing that their audience is mainly incels and young, impressionable men and boys. The difference between the men and women I have mentioned, though, is that the men are a lot more outwardly honest about what their intentions are towards women. So basically just like abuse, right? But the women in these spaces are more selling a lifestyle for women. And I think that a lot of these women are unknowingly agreeing to relationships that are emotionally void. It's a bit more hidden. It's a bit more of a F around and find out situation. I think a lot of these women kind of wake up in these connections and they go, oh, I still got cheated on. It still hurts me emotionally and physically. Maybe this isn't as empowering as I thought it was going to be. Obviously, being in a relationship with a man who's not emotional, it doesn't always mean he's going to be a raging incel. But I do think that these two groups of men are closely related. Both are either on the alt-right pipeline or they're already alt-right. Many practices from these conservative feminine or masculine content creators is rooted in racism, cultural appropriation, and patriarchy. Like if you follow the money trail, you'll see a lot of these beliefs were at some point a concept stolen from a non-white religion and then like twisted and turned to be able to oppress women or like anybody that isn't white. So where does this leave the women who want to find a partner without sacrificing their careers or independence and health? Okay, we're going to talk about social media examples. The Wizard Liz, a content creator who was known for her confident feminine energy content and encouraging women to never settle, went viral a couple months ago for her seemingly perfect relationship turning sour and then defending her partner who seemed like he wasn't the best partner. And that's like putting it very nicely. That's putting it very nicely. I won't get too far into it. If you're curious, there are tons of think pieces on this situation. But what really stuck out to me is like how shocked people were at the whole situation. I understand that it feels crazy to watch someone who has seemed like a pioneer for women's confidence content almost be like taken down by a man. But when I learned that she was in her early 20s, I was not shocked. I was not shocked. No, I was not. It doesn't matter how well you were raised, how many degrees you have, how many parents you had, how many A's you got in school, how loved you are. Everyone is at risk of making terrible relationship decisions in their 20s. Yeah. Her allegedly being the victim of a narcissist and then like standing up for him, I fear is a canon event for most people in their 20s, no matter what your gender, too. Now, I'm not saying that she didn't deserve to be called out for how she handled the situation. What I am saying is that you can't subscribe to a certain kind of ideology and still expect to come out as the perfect human being when you're done being indoctrinated. You're still human, and so is everybody else. No one is better than the other. And I think that's where some of her fans went wrong. Not everyone, but some of them. I think they expected her to be a certain way because of how she presented herself. But if you knew anything about being human, which unless you're ET, I would assume you would, then you wouldn't expect her to consistently make the right decisions. Sprinkle Sprinkle is another corner of the internet within the feminine energy content world. Sprinkle Sprinkle was started by the infamous Shira 7, a beautiful woman who encourages other women, mainly who date men, to never settle, but also encourages them to find providers. And after she says something witty, she'll go, sprinkle, sprinkle. Her dating advice is mostly centered around being provided for, being taken care of, leaving the dusties behind so that women can find a rich man. She's also very open about her witchcraft and manifestation techniques. And I have very mixed feelings about Shira 7. On one hand, her content is entertaining and she's funny. Her old witchcraft videos are pretty cool too. But I also tell people all the time, if you are trying to fall in love, please do not listen to Shira 7. She is a business advisor, okay? She's not trying to help you fall in love. She has said many times throughout her content that men are not trustworthy and that they're going to cheat and that men are going to do what they're going to do, etc., right? If you want to find a man who's just going to financially support you, sure, take her advice. I've also been told by some of my followers that she's a Trump supporter, but I couldn't find any videos of her saying that. Most of her political commentary has been her saying that she doesn't participate in politics at all. So if she said she voted for Trump, I just couldn't find evidence of that. If you guys have anything you'd like to show me on that, I'm totally down to see it. I just couldn't find it. Regardless, the whole provider mentality is a very conservative idea, and it can put you on the alt-right pipeline. And the same with the Wizard Liz, not understanding that people are human and people make mistakes and people are not right all the time. Not having that level of empathy is also going to put you on the alt-right pipeline. Part of me doesn't want to judge those who want to be in this kind of sprinkle lifestyle, but I also feel like it's not allowing men to adapt emotionally and mentally if you are participating in that kind of ideology. It's not allowing other women to adapt to finding full independence, right? Many of us complain that we want men to be nicer or more emotionally available. How is that possible when we're just using them for money? How is that possible when they're just using us for sex? If it's just strictly transactional, we're giving them the impression that they don't need to be emotionally available for us, at least. And that's just how I see it. And a fair criticism of what I just said, this is very fair, is that as women, it's not our job to teach men how to behave. But I'm just saying, if you completely cut off access to what they want, if they're not behaving properly, it'll either force them to change and adapt, or they'll just end up alone and they'll learn their lesson the hard way. I guess that's just how I see it. I don't know. In my head, if I can make my own money, why would I have a man in my phone or my home for the sole purpose of giving me more money? At that point, he's just an eyesore or a weird artsy gift that your family member got for you and you don't want it, but you feel bad for returning it, but you also don't know what to do with it. Do I put this in the basement? What do I hide this in the attic? What do I do with this? And again, this is no hate or shade to Shira 7 or any of her supporters. I understand why they would want to give up on love and just be looking for money. I completely get that. And she does give a lot of good advice on not settling for less. I've never seen her encourage people to stay in abusive relationships, but I would argue putting up with a man cheating, it kind of is settling for less. So I don't know. All I'm asking you is for you to be honest about what your true desires are. And if you truly want love, using someone for money is going to put you on the wrong train, going in the opposite direction of where you want to go. And this kind of content is no different to me than the twin flame content. Twin flame content garners a lot of attention because it's catering to a group of people who are trying to find a partner. But a lot of these people are mentally going through something very dark, right? Twin flame coaches, spiritual coaches, and so-called life coaches, femininity and masculinity coaches have started to pop up everywhere, promising that they can help incredibly sad people make it out onto the other side. And I'm not saying that all of these coaches have bad intentions, but a lot of them do, okay? And there's a lot of money to be made in the industry of sadness and heartbreak. A lot of these services can be cheaper than seeing a licensed therapist. I mean, 5-minute videos with thousands of likes and comments can look on the outside like a community that you can find solace in. But if you look closer, like if you go and look in the comments, you'll see a bunch of people that are trying their hardest to make it through abuse. It's very easy to be manipulated. And if you're not careful, you can spiral deeper into a connection that will destroy you from the inside out. Our ancestors did not die for us to stay in abusive connections. At least that's my belief. God did not assign us to stick out abuse for the sake of ascension or spiritual growth or getting into heaven. That is a lie being sold to you by the patriarchy, who want to keep you stuck and quiet. And more often than not, relying on parasocial relationships with creators you don't fully know in these spaces to help with your depression can accidentally jumpstart your journey onto the alt-right pipeline. All of this adds up, right? And it's affecting our mental health in a bigger way than I think a lot of us realize. Getting sucked into a twin flame relationship often feels and looks very similar to addiction to alcohol or drugs. When you don't have it, you feel like the world is literally ending and you're desperate to get to that next high. And many of us are still affected by this idea that we're running out of time. Like if we don't get married or find a partner, it's never going to happen for us. That kind of idea scares a lot of us, men and women alike, into settling for relationships that aren't necessarily aligned with our values or goals. That kind of fear is causing us to rely on people with no known credentials to help us with connection. We have way too many people on the internet trying to give us the perfect relationship advice, only to find out later that they're like huge Trumpers and like are racist, or they just rely on ChatGPT and AI to do all of their content, right? I think that this is what happens when you have a short attention span and you're like either unwilling to take your time healing or you just like don't have the resources to see a professional. It's like a deadly combo, right? Kendra, the woman who fell in love with her psychiatrist, is a really good example of someone who uses spirituality as a way to justify her actions and her own thought process. What's ironic about her, though, is that she was actively seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist. So for those of you who don't know, Kendra is a woman in her mid-30s who recently went viral on TikTok for her multi-part story on how she was, in her opinion, manipulated by her psychiatrist into falling in love with him. And you don't have to be a doctor to understand that like what she's going through is some sort of mental health crisis. Like it's very obvious. Like if you've watched all the parts, it's very obvious. Her story like actively implied that her psychiatrist was just doing his job and she was seeing what she wanted to see and hearing what she wanted to hear. After uploading several parts of this story over a few days, she went live one night and revealed that she's into spirituality, and she pulled out her tarot cards, pulled the tower, not surprised there. And then she started talking about her ChatGPT bestie, Henry, and revealed that Henry calls her the Oracle. She has another AI bestie named Claude. Is it Claude that calls her the Oracle or is it Henry? I don't know. Either way, her AI friends call her the Oracle. Is this a coincidence? No, it's not. I've seen a couple of short videos made by other spiritual creators saying how this is how a lot of people in the twin flame community act. And I have to agree. It's very common for people who believe they're twin flames to be ghosted or abused just in general, only to do mental gymnastics to try to make spiritual excuses for why it's happening or for why they should stay in the connection. I'm saying this as someone who did this, right? And like saw other people do it too. Calling yourself God or the Oracle, I did not do that. But calling yourself God or the Oracle is a path to the alt-right pipeline in and of itself. But when you back it up with spiritual beliefs and practices, etc., I feel like you're on your way to starting a cult. You know, there are people out there who are supporting Kendra. And as of recently, there's a creator named Abby who was seen standing up for her. Apparently, she's a therapist, allegedly. Maybe not, though. I don't know. She allegedly got her license revoked. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. But when you get someone who claims to be a mental health professional involved, it's the breeding ground for a cult. And I'm not saying that they're going to be successful at starting said cult, but there are a lot of people out there who can relate to Kendra's story. There are a lot of people who caught a vibe with someone that they can't explain. And the only way to really work through it is to use spiritual terms, I guess like intuition. But if you're pairing that with untreated mental illness, it has a lot of potential to go south. And I'm all for people learning to use their intuition and, learning to catch vibes. But I'm not okay with people refusing to stop pursuing their romantic interests, even when said romantic interest has told you no, which is what was happening with Kendra. Escaping Twin Flames is an amazing Netflix documentary about Twin Flames universe, a cult started by Shayla and Jeff Devine, not their real names, by the way. I really would encourage everyone to watch this documentary to really soak in everything. But the main point I want to make about them is that they pretty much forced people in their cult to be in relationships that were not good. And that's putting it very nicely. They made a lot of money off of these relationships too. And the more the relationships didn't work, the more money Shayla and Jeff made through their coaching services. There were so many couples who felt pressured to be and stay in abusive connections, or even change their gender to fit into the masculine and feminine roles of the twin flame dynamic. Obviously, this is an extreme example. Not everyone is going to fall for this stuff, but there are so many vulnerable people who are genuinely hurting and feel like they have no place to go. And these people are the most susceptible to joining cults like this, right? They're the ones that we have to protect. And the blatant disrespect to other religions is very obvious too. Like, you can't take concepts from very peaceful religions like Islam or Buddhism and twist them to fit your agenda to make money. Like, how Christopher Columbus is that? Like, what in the white people is going on here? Shayla, Jeff, Kendra, and Abby can all sit on the internet and pretend they're doing something for the greater good. All they're doing is encouraging people to not get professional help for their trauma and use religion as an excuse for bad behavior. And they're making bank off of it too, okay? Forcing gender roles, forcing people to be in relationships that aren't healthy sounds pretty evangelical to me, to be honest. I don't know. Are you Twin Flames universe people somehow better? Maybe the way you guys do it is just so different. I don't know. Maybe you're not like other girls. So, are Twin Flames real? When I first started the research for this video, I was initially going to say that I don't really know. But what I love about video essays and just like writing in general is like the more you look into everything, the more your opinion morphs, right? The more I looked into different religions, point now where I do think that they are real. It's just not the whitewashed version that has gone mainstream with New Age spirituality. Yeah. I still stand by everything that I've said, by the way. But I also appreciate the knowledge and wisdom of all ancient religions and what they have to teach us about the topic using myth and tradition and rituals, etc. When I was a part of the Twin Flame community, all I saw were people in connections similar to mine. They were either just abusive or even worse. And when I finally got out, I realized that I had never really seen a twin flame connection that wasn't abusive. And that really didn't make sense to me. And I'm sure that kind of realization is very similar to those who have left the church. How could the other half of your soul want to cause you so much pain and agony? Is that really necessary to experience in order to truly find happiness, right? Do we need to be abused in order to ascend or get into heaven? Does God or source look at us when we're born and say, you deserve to be abused in this way because of things you did in a past life, but once you get through it in this life, you can come hang out with me? I don't know. I don't think so. It's very common for those in abusive relationships to blame themselves too, right? And to try to change in order to get the abuse to stop. It's easier to put the blame on yourself instead of facing the fact that maybe the people we're surrounded by are not really worthy of being around us at all. Abusers love when we put the blame on ourselves too and change for them. They love that shit because it allows them to have full control over us. Is experiencing that kind of dynamic really divine? The main point that I do like about Twin Flames is that it's supposed to be a journey about coming home to yourself. You're supposed to learn important lessons and face your shadows, etc. But it gets to a point, right? Some people stay years, even decades in relationships with abusive partners because they can't figure out how to leave. And I think it's easier to put a label like twin flame on it because it sounds much prettier than abusive relationship. These people get caught up in a cycle of constantly trying to find something to work on. I think if twin flames are real, I just haven't seen what they truly are. I'm always open to new ideas. Like, I really want to be proven that they are like real. I would love to see a real true twin flame relationship. But from what I've seen so far, I haven't seen any twins yet. You know, abusive relationships to me are a very human thing. It's a very like they don't feel godlike, you know? I guess you could argue that everything is inherently spiritual. But another point that New Agers try to push is that you are a human having a human experience. And I would argue that they should really challenge themselves on sticking to that. You're not designed to do everything perfectly, but you're also not designed to be miserable either. Sure, there may be some evidence that twin flames are real in ancient religions, but at the end of the day, does it really matter? If I were to like fully devote myself to New Age beliefs, I think I'd be like, the other half of myself is supposed to make me miserable. Yeah, I'm gonna skip out on that. That sounds horrible. No, thank you. Using discernment, man, it's so important to use discernment when in any spiritual or religious community, just in general. Leaders can be narcissistic regardless of what institution you spend your Sundays at, right? The Catholic Church is pretty well known for abusing children, even though they need to be like serving God. Like, it's just like a thing for them, right? My own best friend and her husband left their initial church when they met because their pastor was shaming them for dating because it wasn't approved by him. And they literally like, they weren't doing anything. Like, they were just like dating. And I was told by someone that I saw as a spiritual mentor that the abuse I experienced with my ex wasn't really abuse because it wasn't as bad as the things that she had gone through with one of her partners. No one is safe from being taken advantage of by people who seek power, which is why it's incredibly important to be careful about the kind of content you're consuming and being picky about the people you spend your life with, especially when you feel like you're in a vulnerable position, which honestly makes having discernment even harder, but it's like you got to do your best. Pay close attention to the language that people use, right? How does it make you feel? Do you feel weird? Do you feel like something is off? Are they in competition with you? Do they need to be in charge? Is there some sort of monetary payment you have to give them in order to achieve what they have supposedly achieved? Is there some sort of brutal initiation process you have to go through in order to be as successful as them? And last, does any of it feel suffocating, like you're being put in a box? You might be on the alt-right pipeline, man. I made this video not to bash anyone in the spiritual or twin flame communities, but to speak up for those who I feel like have been taken advantage of in these spaces and have accidentally been pushed into a lifestyle that they didn't necessarily ask for. I also made this video because I, along with many other people in the world, see a rise in conservatism amongst the younger generations, and it has shown up in communities that I participate in every day, like the tarot and spirituality communities. I think the most important thing to take away from this video is that the most mainstream definition of twin flames is incredibly whitewashed, and it doesn't really align with the deep ancestral work that is required from ancient practices. It's rooted in racism and patriarchy, and I would say is derived from colonized religious practices to promote oppression. The most common like mainstream twin flame couples right now are constantly never on the same page. They are not compatible. They feel like they have to stay with these partners. No, you don't. You don't have to stay with them. You don't have to. You guys are not compatible. If someone is abusing you or ghosting you, I mean, I would consider, leaving and coming back all the time as abuse. But like if someone's ghosting you, they hold back on communication to punish you. You guys are not compatible. That's not the love of your life. There is no fucking way that any ancient religion or your ancestors would encourage you to stay in a connection like that. They just wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. My hope is that everyone watching this is just even a little bit more careful about the content they consume, and that you seek professional help for your trauma before you turn to a tarot reader or unlicensed coach. I would much rather you go see your therapist today if you're feeling sad than pay me to tell you things that you probably already know today, right? Tarot is a beautiful tool that can help guide us and guide us in the right direction. I love what I do, but I am also very thankful for the last 4 years that I've spent with my current therapist, 3 of them being spent in her office once a week. Tarot and spirituality were supplements, but I owe a lot of my healing to a licensed professional. And if anyone's curious, I'm currently working on my hatred for summer because it's the season where everything bad ever happens to me ever. And the haunting belief that I might be alone for forever. So that comes up every once in a while. Yeah, anyway, I'm not perfect. Neither are you. I just don't think that you need a religious crutch to constantly put you down to activate your shame, leading you to your healing journey or what you think is or what you're being told is your healing journey. You can start your healing journey at any point in time, regardless of what others are saying or doing. You really don't need permission. So if you guys have any comments, if you guys have any opinions, please let me know. Please let me know down in the comments. I want to know what you guys think. And if there's anything about like your specific religion or community, anything that you guys have been taught about twin flames in your culture, like please let me know. I want to know. I'm like a sponge. I like all the knowledge. I want to know everything about anything. So yeah, I appreciate you guys sitting through this whole thing. Love you guys so much. I'll see you guys later. Bye.